The encounter in the junkyard. The night was cold, and the wind blew dust across the empty streets of the ruined alien city. Daniel, a human soldier left behind after the Great War, walked alone with a small bag of rations on his back. He was searching for shelter and maybe something useful to survive the next day. At the edge of the city stood an old junkyard, filled with broken machines, rusted ships, and piles of forgotten scrap. Daniel often went there to look for metal pieces or wires that he could sell. But this night, something was different. Something felt alive inside the silence of the junkyard. As he stepped over sharp metal and broken glass, Daniel heard a faint sound. At first, he thought it was the wind, a soft whimper carried by the air. But then, he heard it again. Clearer this time. It was the cry of a child. Daniel stopped and held his breath, his heart beating faster. He followed the sound through narrow paths between the piles of junk until he reached a shadowed corner. There, hidden behind a broken piece of a ship's wing, he saw them. A thin alien woman was sitting on the ground, her arms wrapped tightly around a small girl. The child's face was pale, her big dark eyes full of tears. The mother looked weak, her body trembling, and her clothes torn from time and struggle. Both of them looked half-starved, as if they had not eaten for days. The mother pulled the girl closer when she saw Daniel, her eyes wide with fear. She whispered something in her own language, like a warning or a prayer. Daniel slowly raised his hands to show he had no weapon ready. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly, his voice calm and careful. The mother did not understand his words, but she understood his tone. Still, she pressed the girl tighter against her chest. Watching him with suspicion, Daniel knelt down, took his small bag, and carefully pulled out a pack of dry bread and a small water bottle. He placed them gently on the ground and pushed them closer to the mother and daughter. The little girl stared at the food with wide eyes, her lips trembling. She whispered to her mother, pointing at the bread, but the mother shook her head, her face torn between fear and hunger. Daniel waited, not moving, only watching them with quiet patience. Finally, the girl's small hand reached out, quickly grabbing the bread before pulling it back to her chest. She began to eat, tiny bites at first, as if afraid the food might disappear. Tears filled the mother's eyes as she saw her daughter eating. She looked at Daniel, her expression softening just a little. Daniel smiled gently, then pushed the water bottle closer to them. The mother took it this time, opening it with shaking hands and letting her daughter drink. For a long moment, there was silence, broken only by the sound of the little girl swallowing water. Daniel sat quietly, his eyes scanning the dark junkyard to make sure no danger was near. After some time, the mother finally spoke, her voice weak but filled with confusion. "Why? Human help?" she asked in broken words. Daniel was surprised she knew a little of his language. He lowered his head slightly and replied, "Because you need it, and because no one else will." The mother stared at him, searching his face for lies, but all she saw was a tired man with kind eyes. The little girl finished the bread and looked at Daniel with a shy smile. "Thank you," she whispered softly, her small voice carrying more warmth than the cold night air. Daniel felt something stir inside him, something he thought the war had killed long ago. Hope. He stood up slowly, brushing the dust off his jacket. "I will come back tomorrow," he said, even if he was not sure they understood. The mother only held her daughter close, her eyes still full of doubt, but also a spark of wonder. As Daniel walked away, the sound of the girl's soft laughter followed him for a moment. It was the first time he had heard such a sound since the war ended. The junkyard, once just a place of broken things, now held a secret that would change his life forever. Because in that corner of rust and shadows, Daniel had found more than strangers. He had found the beginning of something he did not expect, the start of a family trust tested. The next evening, Daniel returned to the junkyard. The sun was fading, and the shadows grew long between the piles of rusted metal. He carried another small pack of food, though he had little left for himself. The memory of the child's hungry eyes had not left his mind. He knew he had to come back, no matter the cost. As he stepped into the junkyard, he moved quietly, listening for movement. This time, the place seemed too silent. When he reached the corner where he had first found them, the mother and daughter were gone. For a moment, his heart sank, thinking they had left or worse, but then, a faint sound of metal shifting caught his ear. He turned slowly, only to find the little girl peeking out from behind a broken machine. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, but the mother's hand quickly pulled her back. The mother stepped forward, her body tense, standing protectively in front of her child. She stared at Daniel with sharp eyes. Holding a piece of broken pipe like a weapon, Daniel raised his hands again, showing he carried no harm. "I brought food," he said. Placing the pack gently on the ground, he took a step back to give them space. The mother did not move at first, her distrust still heavy, but the little girl wriggled out from behind her. Running to the pack, she opened it with eager hands. Finding bread and dried fruit, her face glowed with joy as she whispered, "Food," the mother sighed, lowering the pipe slowly. Though her eyes never left Daniel, she let her daughter eat, but she stayed watchful. Daniel sat on a piece of broken metal. Keeping his distance, he watched them eat, and for the first time, he noticed how fragile they looked. The girl's small arms were thin, her clothes patched with rough stitching. The mother's face was pale, and her movements carried the weight of someone who had suffered too much. Daniel felt anger rise inside him, not at them, but at the world that had left them in such misery. After a while, the mother spoke again, her voice stronger than before. "You are soldier," she said, her accent heavy but clear enough. Daniel nodded slowly. "I was," he answered. "But the war is over now." Her eyes narrowed. "For you, maybe," she said. Bitterness in her tone. Daniel had no reply, for he knew her words were true. The war might have ended for him, but for her and her child, it had never really stopped. As the night deepened, a sudden noise broke the moment. A crash of metal from the far side of the junkyard, followed by low voices. The mother stiffened, pulling her daughter close. Daniel stood up, scanning the shadows, his soldier instincts returning. Raiders, he thought. Scavengers who searched for anything to steal. They were dangerous, desperate, and often cruel. Two figures appeared, carrying makeshift weapons, their eyes greedy as they searched the piles. Daniel whispered quickly to the mother, "Hide," pointing to the corner behind the ship wing. She hesitated, torn between fear of him and fear of them, but finally obeyed, pulling her daughter into hiding. Daniel picked up a long metal rod from the ground. Gripping it tightly, he knew he could not avoid them now. The raiders moved closer, muttering about finding food or fuel. When they spotted Daniel, they grinned. "Human soldier," one sneered. "Alone and lost," the other laughed, stepping closer. "Give us what you have, or bleed for it." Daniel's grip tightened on the rod, his heart pounding. He did not want to fight, but he could not let them near the mother and child. With a quick step forward, he swung the rod, striking the first raider's arm. The man cried out, dropping his weapon. The second raider rushed in, but Daniel blocked the blow, the clash echoing through the junkyard. The fight was rough, desperate, the sound of fists and metal filling the night air. At one point, Daniel fell, his body crashing into the dirt. The raider raised his weapon to strike, but suddenly, a sharp scream rang out. It was the little girl, her voice trembling but fierce. "Stop!" For just a heartbeat, the raider turned his head, and Daniel used the moment to strike him down. Breathing hard, Daniel stood over the fallen raiders. Bruised but alive, the mother emerged from hiding, her eyes wide with shock. She had seen him fight not for himself, but for them. She stepped closer, her broken pipe still in hand, but her voice softer now. "You protect," she whispered, almost like she did not believe it. Daniel nodded, wiping sweat and dirt from his face. "Yes, I protect." The little girl ran to him, holding his hand with her small fingers. She looked up at him with trust in her eyes, for the first time. The mother did not pull her back. Instead, she let her daughter stand beside him, her face unreadable, perhaps for the first time since the war. She felt a sliver of safety. The junkyard was still broken, the night still dangerous, But something had changed. A bond had begun to form, even if fragile, even if uncertain. A bond forms the night after the fight with the raiders. Daniel could not sleep. Every sound in the ruined city felt louder. Every shadow seemed alive, but it was not fear that kept him awake. It was the memory of the little girl's hand holding his. So small, so fragile, yet so full of trust. He had not felt that kind of trust in a long time. Not since the war took everything from him. At sunrise, Daniel returned to the junkyard, carrying what little food he had managed to save. He walked carefully, his body sore from the fight, but his mind set on seeing them again. When he reached their corner, the girl ran out first, her face bright despite the dirt and hunger. "Human," she called, her voice soft but filled with happiness. Her mother followed slowly, still cautious, her eyes studying him with a mixture of suspicion and gratitude. Daniel sat down on the ground, placing the food between them. This time, the mother did not push her daughter back. She let the girl sit beside him, eating with small hands while glancing up at his face every few seconds. Daniel chuckled quietly. "Slow down. There's enough," the girl smiled, and for a moment, the heavy junkyard felt lighter as they ate. Daniel pulled out a small piece of broken machinery he had picked from the ground. It was a heating unit, old and damaged, but maybe useful. He began tinkering with it, his soldier's training giving him some knowledge of repairs. The girl watched with curious eyes, leaning closer to see. "What is that?" she asked in her broken human words. Daniel looked at her and smiled. "This will make you warm." Her face lit up, as if warmth itself was a gift of magic. Even the mother stepped closer, interest showing in her tired eyes. Daniel worked carefully, joining wires, fixing small circuits, until sparks flickered. The heater came alive with a faint hum, releasing a weak but steady glow of heat. The little girl clapped her hands, laughing in delight. The mother's lips parted, and for the first time, Daniel saw a faint smile. "You fix," she said, her voice quiet. "You help," Daniel nodded. "I try." The mother sat across from him, watching the glow of the heater, her face calmer now. After a long silence, she spoke again, her words heavy with memory. "My name is Sira," she said, pointing at her chest. She then touched her daughter's shoulder. "Her name is Lyra." Daniel repeated the name softly. "Sira. Lyra." Both mother and daughter seemed surprised to hear their names spoken by a human. Sira lowered her eyes, as if fighting with herself, before whispering more. "We had family once," she said slowly, her accent thick but her pain clear. "War came. We lost all." She placed her hand on Lyra's head. Only her left. Daniel listened in silence, his heart heavy. He wanted to say he understood, but words felt empty. Instead, he simply said, "I am sorry." And the way he said it carried more meaning than long speeches. The girl leaned against Daniel's side, her small body warming near the heater. He froze at first, unsure if Sira would pull her back. But Sira did not move, her eyes watching, her lips pressed together. Daniel slowly rested a hand on the girl's shoulder, gentle and protective. In that quiet moment, something fragile yet powerful grew between them. Not just trust, but the first roots of belonging. The silence was broken by a sharp sound in the distance. A ship flying overhead, too far to see clearly, but close enough to stir fear. Sira's body stiffened, her eyes filled with dread. She whispered something quickly in her own language. Holding Lyra tight, Daniel looked at her, confused. "What is it?" he asked, but Sira only shook her head, refusing to explain. Her fear was not of raiders this time. It was deeper, older. Daniel saw it, but he did not press her. Instead, he said firmly, "I will keep you safe." Sira looked at him, her eyes shining with conflict. For a moment, it seemed she wanted to believe him, but her past had taught her otherwise. Still, she did not push him away, and that silence was its own answer. That night, as Daniel left the junkyard, he felt the bond stronger than before. Lyra had called him human with joy. Sira had given him their names. And though the world outside was broken, Inside that corner of scrap and rust, he had found warmth. It was not just the heater that gave it, but the beginning of something he never expected. He had given food, protection, and fire in return. They had given him something far greater, a reason to come back. Asterisk the dangerous secret. The following nights, Daniel kept visiting the junkyard. Each time he came, Lyra greeted him with laughter, while Sira remained watchful. But slowly, Daniel noticed a change. Sira no longer raised her guard with every step he took. Instead, she would sit near the small heater he had fixed, sometimes even sharing quiet words one evening. As the wind howled outside the junkyard, Daniel brought with him a piece of cloth. It was rough and torn, but still warmer than what they had. He handed it to Sira, and though she hesitated, she finally wrapped it around Lyra's shoulders. For the first time, she said softly, "Thank you." Daniel, hearing his name from her lips, felt strange, as if a wall between them had cracked, yet Daniel could sense a weight in her eyes. Even when she smiled faintly, there was always something hidden, a shadow that would not leave. One night, as Lyra slept against Sira's lap, Daniel finally asked, "What are you afraid of?" Sira froze, her hand tightening around her daughter. She looked away, her voice low. "If they find us, we die." Daniel leaned closer, confusion sharp in his mind. "Who?" he asked, but Sira shook her head, refusing to explain. Her silence only deepened his curiosity. Later that night, as he prepared to leave, he noticed something unusual. Around Sira's wrist was a small band, metallic and glowing faintly under the moonlight. It was old, but Daniel recognized it from the war. It was a command bracelet, worn only by high-ranking alien officers. The truth struck him hard. Sira was not just a refugee. She had been someone important, someone powerful. He said nothing then, but the thought burned in his mind as he walked away from the junkyard. Why was she hiding here, starving with her daughter? Instead of leading others, the answer came to him slowly. The war had destroyed more than just cities. It had destroyed trust. Maybe her own people had turned against her. The next day, Daniel returned earlier than usual. He found Sira already awake, her eyes wary, as if she knew what he had discovered. "You wore command metal," Daniel said quietly. Pointing at her wrist, Sira stiffened, her face pale, and for a moment she looked ready to run. Then her shoulders sank and she whispered, "You know now." Daniel nodded, waiting, not pushing, giving her space. Finally, Sira spoke, her voice trembling. "I was leader," she said slowly, struggling with the words. "Before war ended, I gave order." "Wrong order. Many died." She closed her eyes, pain filling every word. "My people blame me, they hunt me. They say I betrayed them." Her hand trembled as she held Lyra close. "But I only wanted to save her." Daniel listened in silence, the truth heavy like iron. He could see the guilt written across her face, but he also saw the truth. A mother who had risked everything for her child. "You are not a traitor," he said firmly. "You are a survivor." Sira looked at him in shock, as if no one had ever spoken those words to her. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Only tears she tried to hide before more could be said. A distant noise cut through the night, engines, heavy and cold. Moving closer, Sira froze, her body shaking. "They come," she whispered. Daniel stood quickly, scanning the horizon, a patrol ship, its lights sweeping over the broken city. Sira pulled Lyra into her arms, hiding her beneath the cloth. Her eyes filled with terror. "If they find us, we die," she repeated. Daniel's mind raced. He had a choice: walk away and let the patrol pass, or stand and protect them. The decision came without thought. He crouched beside them, covering the small glow of the heater. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his voice steady. The ship's light passed close, shining across the piles of junk. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, the sound of engines faded into the distance. Sira let out a shaky breath, holding her daughter tighter. Daniel's heart pounded, but his eyes remained calm. He looked at her and said, "They won't take you." "Not while I am here." Sira stared at him, her face torn between fear and hope. In that moment, a silent promise passed between them, stronger than any words, not just a promise of safety, but of loyalty. That night, Daniel left the junkyard knowing the truth. Sira was not just a mother hiding in the ruins. She was a hunted leader, burdened by guilt and chased by enemies. But none of that mattered to him now. What mattered was the little girl who laughed at his presence, and the woman who had finally spoken his name. For Daniel, their secret was no longer just theirs. It was his to protect, even if it cost him his life. Sacrifice and loyalty. The days grew colder, and Daniel found it harder to find food. The ruined city was running dry. Scavengers had taken most of what was left, but every time he found even the smallest piece of bread or fruit, he brought it to the junkyard. He told himself he could go hungry for a day, but they could not. Lyra's small laugh and Sira's quiet eyes had become the only light in his empty life. One evening, Daniel arrived weak and tired, his steps unsteady. He had given away his last full meal the night before, and now his body shook from hunger. Sira noticed it instantly. Her sharp eyes watching him as he sat down, she asked, "You not eat?" Her words broken but filled with suspicion. Daniel smiled faintly, hiding his pain. "I'm fine. I'll eat later." But Lyra tugged at his sleeve, offering him half of her bread. Daniel's chest tightened at the gesture, but he pushed it back into her hands. "No, you eat, little one," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Sira's face hardened, guilt flashing in her eyes. For the first time, she saw how much he was giving up for them. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, she just looked at him, as if trying to understand why a human would do this. That night, a storm rolled over the ruined city. Winds tore through the junkyard, metal sheets clashing like thunder. Daniel quickly worked to cover their small shelter, using scrap to block the rain. As he did, a sharp piece of rusted metal cut deep across his arm. Blood ran down, and he stumbled, his vision spinning. Sira rushed forward, surprising him, her hands pressing against the wound. "You fool," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You save us, but who saves you?" Her touch was firm, her hand steady despite her trembling body. She tore a strip of cloth from her own clothing and tied it around his arm. Daniel watched her in silence, the pain forgotten for a moment. This was the first time she had touched him without fear, the first time she had shown open care. As the storm raged, Daniel leaned against the wall of the shelter, weak but calm. Sira sat beside him, her daughter asleep between them. She looked at him with eyes no longer filled only with suspicion. "You give all," she said softly, shaking her head. "Why?" Daniel answered without hesitation, "Because no one else will." His voice was low, but the truth in it was stronger than the storm. Sira lowered her gaze, struggling with the weight of his words. Her people had betrayed her, her enemies hunted her, but here was a human giving everything he had. She whispered almost to herself, "Maybe you are not enemy." Daniel let out a tired chuckle. "Took you long enough to see that." Sira's lips curved into the smallest smile, but it was real. For a brief moment, she let her guard fall, and the woman beneath the pain was visible. Later that night, danger came again. The storm had driven desperate scavengers into the junkyard, men searching for shelter. Daniel tried to stand, but his injured arm weakened him. The raiders spotted their small fire and began moving closer. Sira looked at him, then at her sleeping child. For the first time, she did not wait for Daniel to act. She picked up the broken pipe he had once used and stood tall. Her voice cut through the storm as she shouted at the raiders. Her language was sharp, filled with authority, the voice of the leader she once was. The scavengers hesitated, unnerved by her sudden fierceness, and in that pause, Daniel found the strength to rise beside her. Together, side by side, they faced the danger. The raiders finally turned away, muttering, their courage broken. When it was over, Daniel sank back down, breathing hard. Sira crouched beside him, her hands steady on his shoulder. "You are hurt because of us," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "No, because I chose to care." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she reached for his hand. It was not just gratitude, it was something deeper. A bond that had grown from sacrifice and loyalty, stronger than fear. As the storm faded into quiet rain, Sira leaned back against the junk wall. Her daughter curled in her arms. Daniel sat close, his body aching but his heart steady. In that fragile silence, he realized he was no longer just helping strangers. He was part of them now, part of something worth protecting. And though the world outside was broken and cruel, here in the Junkyard, a family was beginning to take shape. Becoming a family. The storm had passed, leaving the Junkyard wet and heavy with the smell of rust and rain. Daniel woke with his arms still wrapped in Sira's cloth, his body weak but his mind strangely at peace. When he opened his eyes, he found Lyra sitting close, watching him with her wide, curious gaze. She smiled and whispered softly, "Father." The word slipped out like a mistake, but it hung in the air, powerful and heavy. Daniel blinked, stunned, his heart tightening. He had not heard that word in years, not since before the war. He looked at Sira, expecting her to correct her daughter, but she only sat silently, her face unreadable, her eyes lowered. Daniel swallowed hard, unsure what to say. He simply reached out and placed his hand gently on Lyra's head. She laughed, leaning into his touch as if it was the most natural thing in the world. That day, something changed in the air. Daniel helped Sira repair their small shelter, strengthening it with stronger pieces of scrap. Lyra followed him everywhere, asking questions in her broken human words. "Why you fix this? What is this? How you do that?" Her endless curiosity made Daniel laugh despite his pain. He realized he had not laughed like this since he was a boy. The Junkyard, once only shadows and silence, now echoed with small bursts of joy. At night, when the heater glowed faintly, Sira finally spoke. "She calls you father," she said quietly, her eyes watching the light instead of his face. Daniel nodded slowly, unsure how to answer. "I don't want to take the place of someone she lost," he whispered. Sira shook her head, her voice low but firm. "Her father is gone, long time. She remembers little, only hunger, only fear." She glanced at him, her eyes softer than before. "But you give her food. You fight for her. You stay. That is more than anyone." Her words struck him like a weight. He had come to the Junkyard only to give food to strangers. Yet now he was being given something he had never expected, a family. Daniel looked at Sira, her face tired but beautiful in the soft glow. For the first time, he saw not just a survivor, not just a hunted leader, but a woman carrying a hope she had buried deep. He whispered, "Then I will not leave you." Sira closed her eyes, her lips trembling, as if she wanted to believe but was afraid to. The next morning, Daniel taught Lyra how to build small traps for catching rats and birds. She clapped with joy when the first one worked. Proud of her skill, Sira watched from a distance, her heart torn between fear and warmth. She had lost everything because she once trusted too much, yet here she was, watching her daughter call a human father, and worse, watching herself begin to trust him too. When Daniel shared his own portion of food with them again, Sira's chest ached with both gratitude and guilt, but their fragile peace did not last. That night, as Daniel prepared a small fire, he noticed movement beyond the Junkyard walls, dark shapes shifting in the rain. Too quiet for scavengers, too organized. He felt the hairs on his neck rise. When he turned to Sira, he saw the same fear on her face. She knew who they were. "They found us," she whispered. Pulling Lyra into her arms, Daniel's heart pounded. His injured arm still weak but his resolve stronger than ever. He looked at Sira and said firmly, "Then we fight or we run. But I will not let them take you." Sira's eyes filled with tears, not of fear but of something deeper. In that moment, she realized he was no longer just a human who brought food. He had become part of them, flesh of their flesh, a protector, a father, and something even more dangerous to her guarded heart, hope. As the shadows drew closer, Daniel moved to stand in front of them, gripping a piece of broken steel like a blade. Sira placed her hand on his arm, steady and strong. Together they waited in silence, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. For the first time since the war, Daniel was not fighting for orders or survival. He was fighting for his family, and though the night ahead promised danger, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt belonging. The final choice. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of footsteps moving through the junkyard. Figures in dark armor slipped between the piles of scrap, their glowing eyes searching. They were not raiders, not scavengers. They were hunters, soldiers from Syrah's own people. They had finally found her. Daniel stood in front of Syrah and Lyra, his body tense, his injured arm still wrapped in cloth. He gripped a jagged piece of steel like a blade. His heart pounded, but his eyes were steady. Behind him, Syrah held her daughter close, whispering to calm her trembling body. The hunter's leader stepped forward, his voice sharp and cold. "Syrah," he called, "by order of the council, you are guilty of betrayal. Surrender, and we may spare the child." Syrah's face tightened, tears in her eyes, but her arms only held Lyra tighter. She whispered, "Never." Daniel stepped forward, his voice cutting through the night. "If you want them, you'll have to go through me." The soldiers laughed, their metallic voices echoing. "A human?" One sneered, "You think you can stand against us?" Daniel's grip tightened on the steel, his voice firm. "I don't think, I know." The hunters moved in. Weapons raised, Daniel charged with a roar, his body moving with the instinct of a soldier who had survived countless battles. The clash was brutal, sparks flying as metal struck metal. He blocked the first strike, spun, and drove his weapon into the chest of one soldier. Another knocked him back, pain shooting through his arm. But he refused to fall. Syrah watched in horror, her heart tearing as Daniel fought for them. She had vowed never to trust again. But now her soul screamed at the thought of losing him. She placed Lyra in a corner and whispered, "Stay hidden." Then she picked up the broken pipe and rushed into the fight. Her voice rang out in her native tongue, commanding, strong, the voice of the leader she once was. For a moment, even the hunters hesitated. Shaken by her fire, together, Daniel and Syrah fought side by side. He blocked the heavy blows, she struck with speed. They were not warriors of the same blood, but in that moment, they moved as one. Every strike, every breath, was a promise to protect Lyra, to protect each other. The battle was fierce, and soon only the leader remained. He towered over them, his blade glowing with energy. Daniel's body was weak, his breath ragged, but he stepped forward anyway. The leader raised his weapon for the final blow. Daniel braced himself, ready to take it if it meant saving them. But before the strike could fall, Syrah leapt in front of him, her voice thundered, "No more!" With one desperate swing, she struck the leader's helmet. Sparks bursting into the air, the hunter stumbled, and Daniel used the last of his strength to drive the steel into his chest. The leader fell, his weapon clattering onto the broken ground. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of Daniel's heavy breathing. He dropped to his knees, his body shaking. Blood dripping from his wounds, Syrah rushed to him, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the bleeding. "No, stay with us," she whispered, her voice breaking. Lyra ran to his side, tears streaming down her small face. "Father," she cried, holding his hand tightly. Daniel's eyes softened, his voice weak but full of warmth. "You are my family," he whispered. Syrah's tears fell freely now, her heart no longer able to deny what she felt. "You are not just human," she said through her sobs. "You are ours." Daniel smiled faintly, his strength fading. But in that smile, there was no regret, only peace. He had fought not for duty, not for orders, but for love, and in that broken junkyard, he had finally found the place to belong. The night grew still again, the storm clouds drifting away. Syrah and Lyra held him close, their warmth protecting him as much as he had protected them. And though the world outside was still filled with enemies, hunger, and war, inside that corner of rust and shadows, something stronger than fear had been born. Not just survival, not just trust, but family forever.